It was a typical day at Westbrook Middle School, but something was different. Jamal Carter, a quiet, composed boy who had just moved to town, sat alone in the cafeteria, his eyes hidden behind the shield of his glasses. On the outside, Jamal seemed like any other 13-year-old, trying to find his place in a new school. But beneath that calm exterior was a story nobody expected, a story that would shake the very foundations of power, respect, and the way we judge strength. The school's notorious bully, Derrick Watson, had found a new target. Jamal was now the latest victim of Derrick's reign of terror, a torment that had turned a once quiet school into a battleground. Derrick had a history, a long one, of picking on the weak, the different, the ones who didn't fight back. But Jamal wasn't like the others. What Derrick didn't know, what no one knew, was that Jamal was a black belt in martial arts. Not only trained to defend himself, but also trained in something far more powerful: self-restraint, emotional control. He had spent years learning how to master not just his body, but his mind. And that was about to turn everything on its head. When Derrick crossed a line, humiliating Jamal in front of the entire school, everyone expected a typical reaction: a fight, a blow-up. But Jamal's response was far more shocking than anyone could have anticipated. Derrick was a master at reading people, and he knew Jamal was different. There was something about him, calm, almost unnervingly so. But that only made Derrick want to tear him down more. Jamal's presence was a threat to everything Derrick had built. He didn't just want to be feared, he wanted to be admired. And he couldn't let Jamal slip under the radar like that. It started small. Name-calling, shoving in the hallways. Standard bully behavior. But Derrick was relentless. He humiliated Jamal in front of the class, making cruel jokes about his clothes, his speech, his demeanor. Everyone laughed. Everyone but Jamal. He stood there, silent, unfazed. Derrick pressed harder, looking for that crack in Jamal's armor. And then, one day, Derrick pushed too far. In the middle of lunch, in front of a crowded cafeteria, Derrick poured a glass of milk over Jamal's head. Laughter erupted like a wave crashing over Jamal. But his face didn't twitch. His hands didn't shake. His eyes didn't even blink. Instead, Jamal did something no one expected. He slowly wiped his face, and with the same calmness he'd carried all day, he picked up his tray, turned, and walked away. No anger, no retaliation, just silence. It wasn't what people wanted. They wanted a fight. They wanted Jamal to lash out, to give them a spectacle. But he didn't, and that was what terrified them. The silence hung in the air like an electric charge, and for the first time, people started looking at Jamal differently. As Jamal walked away from the incident, the whispers began. Some students started questioning Derrick's power. They wondered how long they'd been allowing someone to intimidate them based on fear. But that wasn't the most shocking part. The most shocking part came when one of Derrick's closest friends, Tyler, who had always supported Derrick's bullying, started talking. Tyler had seen it all. He had watched Derrick target Jamal, taunt him, push him to the edge. But now Tyler was singing a different tune. "I saw it," he said. "Derrick made Jamal a target. It wasn't right." But then things got stranger. Tyler's story started to change. A key witness to the events, now suddenly hesitant, began contradicting himself. The very same student who had laughed the loudest during Jamal's humiliation, Lily Harper, now claimed she hadn't seen anything at all. She couldn't remember what happened, even though she was front and center when the milk was poured. Tyler's change of heart was clear. Someone had gotten to him. Someone powerful. But who? Jamal's calm, composed demeanor had caught the attention of someone who wasn't just watching from the sidelines. Coach Davis, the martial arts instructor at the school, had seen the way Jamal carried himself. He recognized the signs of a skilled fighter, but more importantly, he recognized a young man who had learned the power of control. One evening, after the chaos of the cafeteria incident had died down, Coach Davis called Jamal into his office. "I know what you did," Coach said quietly, "and I think it's time we talked." Jamal, who had been a student of martial arts for years, hadn't yet told anyone about his black belt. But Coach Davis had his suspicions. The way Jamal moved, the way he handled the situation, It all pointed to something more than just a kid trying to keep his head down. Jamal wasn't afraid of Derrick, but something was amiss. "Look, Jamal," Coach said, his voice stern but understanding. "I know what you're trying to do. You're trying to keep the peace, but this isn't just about you anymore. It's about everyone who's ever been afraid of Derrick. You have a chance to turn this around." Jamal sat in silence, unsure of what Coach meant, but it didn't take long to understand. Derrick had created an atmosphere of fear, and now it was up to Jamal to shift the tides. The next few days were tense. Derrick didn't stop. He still taunted Jamal in the hallways, still tried to push him to his limits. But this time, Jamal wasn't backing down. Not physically, but mentally. He stayed calm, composed, and every time Derrick tried to instigate a fight, Jamal didn't flinch. Jamal's reputation grew. It spread like wildfire through the school. People began to take notice not just of Derrick's behavior, but of Jamal's strength. Derrick's power began to dwindle as the support for Jamal grew. Students who had once been too afraid to speak out against Derrick now found themselves rallying behind Jamal. But then, just as Jamal seemed poised to take control, a new revelation surfaced. Derrick had been planting false evidence, manipulated photos, doctored videos. He had been framing Jamal for things he didn't do, creating a narrative that Jamal was the instigator, the troublemaker. It wasn't just bullying anymore. It was a full-fledged conspiracy. Jamal was no longer just fighting Derrick. He was fighting a system, a web of lies and deception that had been carefully crafted to destroy his reputation. But who was behind it? Who had been pulling the strings all along? Just as Jamal prepared to expose the truth, a sudden, shocking twist hit. Tyler, who had been Jamal's unlikely ally, was found in the school library, face pale, eyes wide with fear. "Jamal," he whispered urgently, "you need to get out of here. They're coming for you." Before Jamal could ask who they were, the door to the library burst open. The principal, surrounded by security, stormed in. "Jamal Carter," the principal said, his voice sharp, "you're under arrest." "For what?" "For a crime no one could even understand." And just like that, Jamal's fight had only just begun. The last words Jamal heard before the door slammed shut were the ones that would haunt him forever. "You're under arrest." The principal's voice echoed in Jamal's ears like a nightmare come to life. For a moment, everything stood still. His chest tightened. His heart raced. He glanced at Tyler, who was shaking his head frantically, mouthing something Jamal couldn't make out. Jamal didn't move. He couldn't. The security officers flanked him, hands gripping his arms as though he were a threat, though he had never posed one. He hadn't fought back, hadn't hurt anyone, he hadn't done anything wrong. But the evidence manufactured, twisted, painted a different story. And the authorities, blind to the truth, saw only what they wanted to see. "Come with us, Mr. Carter," the principal ordered, his tone cold and dismissive. Jamal's breath hitched. Was this really happening? Was he really about to be dragged away for something he didn't do? He was supposed to be the one who exposed Derrick's reign of terror, not the one being punished. The principal's office felt like a courtroom. It was sterile, harsh, a place where the guilty were sentenced before they had a chance to speak. Jamal sat in front of a desk, facing the principal, the two security officers standing beside him. The room reeked of finality. "You know why you're here, Jamal?" the principal said, his voice steady but with an edge of uncertainty. "You've been accused of vandalizing school property and inciting violence." Jamal's stomach churned. It wasn't true. None of it was true. But the evidence against him was overwhelming. Videos, photos, witnesses, at least that's what they said. The manipulated footage Derrick had planted was everywhere. "Do you have anything to say for yourself?" the principal asked, leaning forward. His eyes were sharp, his posture rigid. The system was already set in motion. Jamal was just a cog. Jamal's mind raced. He had to think. He had to find a way out of this trap. "I didn't do it," he said, his voice calm but firm, the only thing he had left. "You've been lied to." The principal gave him a dismissive glance. "Everyone saw the footage, Jamal. It's clear as day." "No," Jamal repeated, his voice growing stronger. "You're seeing what someone wants you to see." Jamal's days were a blur after that. He was suspended from school, the accusations hanging over his head like a storm cloud. He couldn't go back to his classes. He couldn't go back to the friends who had started to rally behind him, those who had seen him as a symbol of something different, something stronger than the cruelty that had ruled Westbrook Middle School. But Jamal wasn't ready to give up. He couldn't. In his downtime, he scoured every piece of evidence, every photograph, every video. He saw the subtle discrepancies, the ways the footage had been altered, the times that didn't match, the angles that seemed too convenient. He noticed things no one else would. Jamal had trained his mind in martial arts, not just his body. And that meant knowing how to see beyond the surface, to recognize the patterns others missed. The first breakthrough came when Jamal found an unedited video on a classmate's phone. It was a shaky, low-quality recording, but it was enough to confirm his suspicion. The clip showed Derrick sneaking into the school's maintenance room with a camera, his intent clear: to stage the whole incident. He had set Jamal up. Jamal couldn't do this alone. He needed someone on the outside, someone who could help him bring the truth to light. That's when he turned to Coach Davis. Jamal knew he couldn't trust everyone, but Coach had proven himself different. When Jamal went to his office, Coach Davis didn't look at him with judgment. Instead, he saw the determination in Jamal's eyes, and it was enough. "You've got something?" Coach Davis said, after hearing Jamal's theory. "You've figured out how they framed you." Jamal nodded. "But I need help to expose it. I can't do it alone." The coach leaned back in his chair, a thoughtful expression on his face. "There's a local journalist, Anna Webb. She covers stories that the mainstream media ignores, things they don't want to report. I think she can help. We'll take this to her, Jamal." Jamal hesitated for a moment. It wasn't just the evidence that would get him through this, it was the public's perception. Would they believe him, or would they dismiss him just like they had with Derrick? But he had no choice. He had to fight. With Anna Webb's help, Jamal slowly began to peel back the layers of corruption and deceit. Anna was relentless in her pursuit of the truth, pulling strings, reaching out to sources, questioning witnesses who had remained silent. Slowly, the pieces began to fall into place. Derrick Watson had been manipulating the narrative for months, framing Jamal not just to tear him down, but to maintain his control over the school. It wasn't just bullying anymore. It was about power. Derrick knew that if he could destroy Jamal's reputation, he could maintain his dominance. But Jamal wasn't just a victim in this case. He was a warrior, and he was ready to fight back. Through the investigation, Jamal uncovered more than just manipulated evidence. He found witnesses who had been paid to testify against him, students who had been coerced into lying, and teachers who had turned a blind eye to Derrick's actions because they were afraid of the bully's influence. It was a system of prejudice and fear, one that had been running unchecked for far too long. In the end, Jamal's resilience paid off. The truth came to light. Derrick was exposed for the manipulative bully he truly was, and the fabricated evidence was brought to court. What followed was nothing short of a public reckoning. Derrick's influence shattered as more and more students found their voices and stood up against him. Jamal was cleared of all charges. The narrative that had been twisted against him was unraveled, and the school, once a place of fear and division, began to heal. The truth, like a blade, cut through the web of lies, and what was left was a new beginning. But Jamal didn't just return to being the quiet, reserved boy he had been. He had changed. He had learned what it meant to fight not just with strength, but with wisdom, with calm, and with a mind that refused to be manipulated. He had fought against a system of prejudice, not with fists, but with intellect. And that, in the end, was what truly made him a warrior. As for Derrick, his reign of terror ended, but the scars remained. Jamal wasn't the only one who had been a victim in this story. So had the students who had stood by, afraid to speak out. But Jamal had given them something they had never had before: the courage to stand up for what was right. Jamal's story wasn't just about one boy overcoming a bully. It was about challenging the system that enabled that bully to thrive. It was about recognizing that the fight for justice doesn't always involve a fight with fists. It often involves the strength to stand firm, to think clearly, and to expose the truth, no matter how hard or dangerous that might be. If you've learned something from Jamal's journey, if you believe in the power of truth, justice, and resilience, then don't let this story end here. Subscribe to this channel for more stories of strength, courage, and the fight for what's right.